Hello and welcome to Global News Today, bringing you exclusive interviews with leading experts every weekday here on Al-Arabiya English. I'm Tom Burges-Watson. Coming up on today's programme, in what's been an eventful week for those advocating Palestinian statehood, we ask a Palestinian presidential advisor what he makes of the major announcements that have been coming out of numerous world capitals on this matter. We'll also find out what the situation is like on the border between Lebanon and Israel. We'll be speaking to a UNIFIL spokesperson there. And we'll be asking, can Iran avoid fresh European sanctions? The clock is ticking before they're due to take effect. And in an exclusive interview, we'll ask a spokesperson for Syria's new leadership, what does the new Syria stand for? Hello and welcome to the programme. For the first time in some 60 years, a Syrian leader has taken the floor and addressed the UN General Assembly. Well, President Ahmed Al-Sharaa took the podium and he called for the complete lifting of all sanctions on his country. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Qutaiba Idlbi, who is the director of the American Affairs Department at the Syrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who joins us from New York. You've been at the UN General Assembly. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. Now, this week, your president, Ahmed Al-Sharaa, became the first Syrian president since 1967, since President Nuruddin al-Tassi, to deliver a speech to the UN General Assembly. What does this tell us about Syria's current international status?
Certainly. Thank you, Tom. Of course, this is a historic day, and I think it's as significant as this new era that Syria is going through. I think it's definitely a signal of this new Syria that is coming back to the world, that is telling the world the policies of isolation, the policies of instability, and the policies of regional isolation is over. This is the time for Syria to come back on a regional level, on an international level, and that Syria is ready to extend a hand of friendship, of partnership to the rest of the world. Of course, this is also historic because, yes, this is the first time a Syrian president addresses the UN General Assembly since 1967, but it is actually the first time in 80 years that basically since the establishment of the UN, that a Syrian president addresses the UN General Assembly during the high-level week. So it is, in a sense, a representation of this new era that Syria is entering and represents really what the Syrian people are hoping for in terms of building those bridges of partnership and friendship with the rest of the world.
I mean, clearly turning the page on years of civil war and the turmoil we saw under President Bashar al-Assad has been, no easy task. What would you say have been the greatest successes of these last 9 or 10 months?
So we've inherited a lot of, landmines from the Assad regime, actual landmines in the ground, also a lot of social, economic, political landmines within society. So it definitely has not been easy to manage those challenges. But I think regardless of those, challenges, as we've seen in the last months, Syria, the government and its people have been as close as ever. The Syrian people do believe in their government, and we've been able to make concrete steps in getting the country forward. There was a national dialogue earlier this year that resulted in the establishment of a new government back in March. Today we are talking about the next election, which is going to happen in a couple of weeks. This is the first election that Syria, real election that Syria goes through in 60 years. And it is an indication where Syria is going. And, a few months after the parliament is elected, we're going to have a constitutional committee that's going to start drafting the first constitution for the country since the fall of the Assad regime. I think regardless, of course, with all of those achievements, there were challenges that we've seen in the last 9 months. Nonetheless, the unfortunate events in Sweden and on the coast. But I think the most important thing here and the important success is that the Syrian people continue to show their commitment to accountability, to justice, but also to social peace. And they are still committed to moving forward together, all of Syria, all of its communities, to actually build the country they've dreamt of for so many decades.
Right, and of course, for that to happen, a healthy economy is going to be needed, and that's probably why President Al-Sharaa outlined economic development as being one of the three key pillars or three key priorities he set out. We heard him at the UN urging countries around the world to lift all sanctions on Damascus. And I want to ask you, are we starting to see things improve for the Syrian economy? And to what extent are sanctions still holding you back?
So we've seen some improvements since President Trump's historic decision back in May to lift sanctions on Syria. That decision resulted in lifting sanctions imposed by executive orders. We still see some sanctions from the U.S., from other countries, and from the UN, which are preventing the Syrian people from moving forward. It is preventing foreign investment from coming in, and it is actually preventing the economy of the country to really create jobs and move forward. The hope is, by working with partners with the international community, that we would be able to remove all of those obstacles, so Syrians themselves would be able to rebuild the country again that they've dreamt of.
Now, President Al-Sharaa has held his second meeting with the US President Donald Trump in New York. Their second meeting, because the first one, of course, was in Riyadh back in May. Are you able to give us a sense of what they've been discussing?
The most important thing there is continuing the pathway that President Trump started in lifting sanctions on Syria. So we've discussed lifting the remaining sanctions of Syria, specifically the Caesar Act, which is a task that the U.S. Congress will have to take on in the next couple of months. In addition to actually moving forward with bilateral relations, there is a lot for Syria and the United States to work on in the next not only a few months and years, but also a few decades, not only in terms of a mutual interest when it comes to regional stability and economic prosperity in the region, but also in terms of building this partnership that both countries dream of building and never happened basically in the history of both countries. So we're looking forward to having another conversation soon between the two presidents. And I think from there, it's really going to focus on what this partnership would look like.
I mean, under Bashar al-Assad, Syria's top allies were clearly Russia and Iran. Who do you think Syria views as its closest allies today?
I think what Syria is really hoping for is to break away with the previous regime policy of choosing one camp over the other, but also the proxy relationship that the regime has created with many countries. The new Syria wants to extend a hand of friendship and normal relations with everyone, for sure. So we're hoping that would be, many countries have tried zero foreign policy problems before. It wasn't always successful, but we hope that we would be able to manage, again, to be able to build on mutual interest where that exists and manage disagreement where that exists as well with every country.
So for example, for Russia to return to the fold and become one of Damascus's allies once again, would your government be prepared to set some conditions? And I'm thinking, for example, of the extradition of Bashar al-Assad. Could that be a condition your government sets for a reset with Moscow? I mean,
certainly, as you know, Russia has participated in targeting and killing the Syrian people in the last 10 years. I think the hope there is to work together, certainly, in helping the Syrian people achieve accountability, not only from Bashar al-Assad himself, but also from the numerous officers and regime officials who have sought refuge in Russia, estimated at around 3,000 officers and officials. So there's definitely a lot to work there in terms of accountability, something that the Syrian people really look forward to doing.
Now, Syria says it stands firmly with the people of Gaza, and that war, unfortunately, continues in Gaza. And of course, Syria has another complicated relationship to manage, which is, of course, with its neighbour, Israel. And Israel has attacked Syria multiple times these last 9 months. What's being done to improve relations between Syria and Israel?
I mean, Israel didn't only attack Syria multiple times. Actually, Israel conducted over 1,000 airstrikes on Syria since December 8th and has done over 400 ground invasions. It also continues to occupy lands that it took over after December 8th. So definitely what is required, this is not beneficial for Syria, this is not beneficial for the security of the region, and this is only giving the space for Iran, for ISIS, for Hezbollah to fill in a vacuum that Israel is creating. The hope is that we are able to find a space where Israel respects Syria's sovereignty and unity and stop violating that sovereignty while giving the space to the Syrian government to govern its own space, its own territory, and provide security for the Syrian people, but also make sure that Syria is not utilized by any party as a launching pad for attacks against any other country.
Now, obviously, the United States wants to see Syria succeed. Those are the indications the Trump administration is giving very clearly. Do you think it's premature to be thinking at this stage about Syria perhaps being one of the next countries to sign up for the Abraham Accords?
I think the situation in Syria is very much different from other countries who were part of the Abrahamic Accords. Many of those countries were not, bordering Israel. They not really have disputes related to sovereignty, related to territorial integrity. They do not have lands that are occupied for Israel. I don't think Syria really fits within that model. But again, our hope is to have calm and peaceful relationships with everyone in the region. The question of the framework is really dependent on the context itself. So I think Syria in that case is a unique case, different from other cases that requires its own framework.
Okay, and I want to pick up on something you were saying a little bit earlier about the sectarian violence we saw in northern coastal areas that we also saw in Sueda during the course of the summer. President Al-Sharaa saying he's committed to keeping all arms under Syrian state control. What's being done to ensure there are no further flare-ups of sectarian violence in the country?
The government has established two national investigation commissions, one for the events that happened in the coast and one for the events that happened in Sueda. The commission for the events that happened on the coast have actually published its report. And basically, it was more even comprehensive than the UN Commission of Inquiry report about the same incidents. The Ministry of Justice, as soon as the report was over, have basically started conducting investigations and making arrests based on the results of that investigation. The Commission for the Unfortunate Events in Sueda have also started the same work, and already arrests were made for many of the perpetrators who've committed crimes during the events in Sueda. Our hope is, as soon as the work finishes by the second committee, that we will be able to push forward for accountability and for justice for the victims, of all crimes that were committed in both. But more importantly, the goal here is to allow the Syrian people to mend the wounds that the Assad regime has created over 60 years and to be able to work together to build the country.
Okay, and just lastly, you've been very generous with your time, Ms. Idlbi. Just lastly, I mean, what do you think is your government's message to the world about what this new Syria stands for?
This new Syria stands for extending, again, friendship and partnership to everyone else around the world. We do want to focus on building on our mutual interest, focus on economic prosperity, and focus on stability, first and foremost of Syria, but also of the region. We do believe that the region has gone through the last few decades, and that the people of Syria and of the region are tired of war, are tired of conflict, and are tired of instability. This is the opportunity that Syria has, that the region has, to move forward, to turn a page on that era. And we hope that we would be partners with everyone in the region and across the globe to make sure that we're able to turn that page.
Well, we appreciate that, and we wish you and Syria all the very best in this new phase. Qutaiba Idlbi, the Director of American Affairs at the Department of the Syrian Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. In other news, more than 150 UN member states now recognize Palestinian statehood. That's a move which has sparked strong condemnation from Israel and triggered the threat of retaliation. Well, before departing for the United States, where he'll be addressing the UN General Assembly, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu denounced leaders who've backed recognition of a Palestinian state. Let's take a listen to what he said.
I will speak the truth at UN General Assembly on the citizens of Israel, the truth of the IDF soldiers, of our country. I will denounce those leaders who, instead of denouncing the murderers, the rapists, the child burners, want to give them a state in the heart of the land of Israel. It will not happen.
Well, we're joined now by Dr. Mahmoud al-Habbash, who is a Palestinian presidential advisor and a supreme judge. He joins us now from Ramallah. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us, Dr. al-Habbash. A lot has happened during the last week. Many more countries have announced that they recognize a Palestinian state. And perhaps most significantly, I don't know if you agree, the United Kingdom and France, two countries that are viewed as being architects of modern-day Israel with the Sykes-Picot Agreement that they both signed in 1916. How significant do you see these announcements of the past week as having been?
These are very critical and significant steps toward the implementation of the legislative resolutions. The PLO, as you know, has been supported with the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council and accepted to establish a comprehensive peace on the basis of the resolutions of international legitimacy. In 1993, a deal was reached between the PLO and the Israeli government. That was just a declaration of a principle so that we can reach into a comprehensive peace. However, sadly, since 1994, and while it was supposed to be just a completion of the initial stage comprising of 5 years in 1999, the successive Israeli governments then have denied all those agreements that were concluded and even just destroyed all the options to resort to those options based on the international legitimacy resolutions. And that's why the Palestinian Authority and the LPO had the only option just to resort to the international community and to the United Nations and other international bodies in order to safeguard peace and also to just maintain the opportunity of ending wars and conflicts. And we called on many countries to recognize the Palestinian states, which they did, and especially to give the Palestinian people the right of self-determination. And we have seen a wave of recognitions since last week, and where we had 149 countries recognizing, now we have over 160 countries recognizing the Palestinian states based on the resolutions of international legitimacy, including the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, without having any settlements and without having any Israeli occupation. The Palestinian state as an independent state, democratic, based on those resolutions. Those recognitions form an important step in this direction. And therefore, when we look at those countries that have started recognizing the state of Palestine, like the UK, Germany, France, Australia, and the list is too long, and with my sincere appreciation for their positions.
Okay, so clearly European governments have been under huge public pressure from their populations. And even today, even in the last few hours, it's been announced that the Slovenian government has imposed a travel ban on the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Are there any signs that the US leadership is feeling that pressure as well to follow suit and recognize a Palestinian state? Any cracks emerging?
We are quite confident that free people who believe in the rights of people, who believe in democracy, who believe in peace, will shoulder their responsibility in putting all the pressures on the decision makers in order to respect the international law and respect the rights of people and their self-determination, including the Palestinian people who had now so far almost a century, and they have been deprived of exercising their legitimate rights of self-determination and to have a state and also to have dignity and freedom. We believe also South Africa has been successful in obtaining just a confession against apartheid, and we believe that we can follow suit from different peoples around the world, including the American people who can put the pressure on the decision maker so they can follow suit those countries that have recognized the Palestinian state. They have to just undertake those obligations vis-à-vis the international community in order to end the Israeli occupation. They have also to force the occupying force, Israel, to abide with the international law and to accept peace on the basis of two-state solution that the entire international community has accepted.
Okay, and as you say, the vast majority of countries at the UN now recognize a Palestinian state. And President Trump's response to the countries that have announced they do in the last couple of days has been, this is a reward for Hamas. That's how he says he views this announcement by those countries. He clearly doesn't approve of it. How do you respond to the idea that recognizing Palestinian statehood is a reward for Hamas?
Hamas does not believe in the two-state solution in the first place, and Hamas does not represent the Palestinian state. Those who represent the Palestinian people are namely the Palestinian Authority and the LPO, and mainly President Mahmoud Abbas. And therefore, I'm just surprised how this could be a reward for Hamas, who does not represent the Palestinian people. And most importantly, this is a right and not a reward for the Palestinian people. This is a legitimate right, and it has been enshrined in the international law, and therefore this right should be respected, the right of the Palestinian people to have a state of their own.
So just to clarify this point, because it's very important, you're saying that Hamas will have no role in a future Palestinian state. Is that correct?
Hamas will never have a role in any governance, individual governance in the Gaza Strip. Hamas will never have a role in defining the future of the Palestinian people or speaking on behalf of the Palestinian people. It is the Palestinian Authority that is entrusted with this task. And even President Abbas, in his speech before the General Assembly, has emphasized on this matter. Hamas will never have a role in the following day once we pull the curtain down on this war. It is the Palestinian state, the Palestinian government, and the LPO, those who will be responsible of running the future of Gaza. Hamas has also has to acknowledge the international legitimacy and abide with it, and also it has to abide with all the obligations of the LPO and surrender its weapons to the Palestinian Authority, to the state of Palestine, and to end all the attempts that might just put Hamas in a position to run the affairs of Gaza. It should be to the Palestinian state and not Hamas.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that for us. Now, in response to recognition of Palestinian statehood, there has been speculation about the Israeli reaction. Some are saying that Israel could react by annexing the West Bank. We're being told today, and there's a report circulating, that President Trump has given assurances that the annexation of the West Bank will not happen. What do you think of that report? Do you think it's credible?
Any Israeli action in the West Bank or in the Eastern Jerusalem will be illegal, and Israel will be held responsible for taking any action of this kind. And all those moves will be in violation of the international law and the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. And namely 2234, which stated explicitly back in 2016 that the Israeli settlements in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and along with the Eastern Jerusalem, are regarded as illegal and should come to an end. And that's why we have seen the International Court of Justice also that have echoed the same findings and stated that this also those should be removed. We have also heard the similar findings by the court last year, where it stated that Israel should finish its occupation of those Israeli territories within 1 year. However, Israel has not given heed to those resolutions, and we have seen what Israel has been doing since 1967. But East Jerusalem should be always the capital of the Palestinian state. The Israeli acts run counter to the international law and should come to an end. And all the Israeli existence and the Israeli occupation from the Palestinian state should be removed based on the wave of recognitions we have been seeing. The only land crossing between the West Bank and Jordan has been closed until further notice by the Israelis. What's your understanding of what's happening there? So this crossing, named King Hussein Bridge, connecting Palestine with Jordan, has been occupied by the Israeli occupation forces in a way that runs counter to the international law and to the agreements that have been concluded in 1993 between the LPO then and the Israeli government. And therefore, by doing so, they are suffocating the Palestinian people, they are restricting the freedom of movement, and the Palestinian people will no longer be able to travel to the West Bank, even though that this crossing is the only way for the West Bank just to the entire world. And now the closure of this crossing is almost like a forcible prison for 3 million people in the West Bank, let alone the roadblocks and that have been installed in different parts of the West Bank and the hostile acts of the Israeli occupation. This is just an inhumane, immoral, and it lacks any legal principle, and therefore the international community should intervene immediately in order to force Israel to respect the international law and also to respect the human rights and the rights of the Palestinian people to have the freedom of movement and to live with dignity, with freedom in an independent Palestine, just like the rest of other nations.
Sir, it is a very busy week for diplomacy. A lot is happening in New York. Your delegation was blocked from going to the UN General Assembly, but not just your delegation. Even Prime Minister Netanyahu, to reach New York, has had to take a special route, an unexpected route in his aeroplane, avoiding the airspace of countries that sign up to the Rome Statute, because if there was an emergency landing, he would be arrested or potentially be arrested in those countries. So a lot is happening. Does it feel like the tide has turned? And does it feel like the momentum is there for something significant to be achieved right now?
Yes, definitely. Times have changed. The international community is no longer accepting the Israeli occupation. The international community has grown weary of this long-standing occupation and the Palestinian people have been deprived from their self-determination since 1984, since the days of Nakba. The Palestinian people had to accept the better solution, and yet with that, Israel is still adamant on denying this Palestinian state and all other peaceful solutions, and also the recognition of the Palestinian people themselves. Today, the world has changed. Today is more convinced with the Palestinian states and with the rights of the Palestinian people and more supportive there too. And now the international community is more convinced with the rights of the Palestinian people. And now what we need is to implement those convictions on ground with the force of the international law, because we believe that the international law has the important effect and force that can make a difference. And we are waiting for this moment where the international community will embark on the implementation of those international resolutions by obliging Israel to respect those laws and end the occupations on all Palestinian territories.
Okay, well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Dr. Mahmoud al-Habbash, Palestinian Presidential Advisor, Supreme Judge, thank you for your time, sir.
شكرا لكم. شكرا.
Well, we're going to stay in the Middle East now and turn to southern Lebanon, where tens of thousands of people remain displaced after Israel's offensive against Hezbollah last September. Well, addressing the UN General Assembly 2 days ago, the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun called for Israel's full withdrawal from Lebanese territory, and he condemned its continued drone strikes in the south. Well, according to UNIFIL, that is the UN peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon, one Israeli drone crashed into its headquarters earlier on this week, but caused no casualties. Well, let's get more now. We can speak to Kandice Ardiel, who is the Deputy Spokesperson for UNIFIL, who joins us now from Naqoura in southern Lebanon. Thank you very much indeed for being with us once again, Kandice, here on Arabiya English. I just want to start by asking you about what happened on Tuesday with that Israeli drone that hit your headquarters quite close to where you are now. What's the latest and what sort of an explanation were you given for that?
Thanks, Tom. So the drone crashed on Tuesday afternoon in an area, fortunately, that wasn't near where anyone was working at the time. So nobody was hurt. There was no damage to our headquarters. But nonetheless, it's a concern to us because any drone coming from Israel flying over Lebanese territory, first of all, is a violation of 1701. And flying over our headquarters, this raises concerns about why such a drone would be there. The IDF did acknowledge that it was their drone, and we have the drone in our possession, and we'll be doing an investigation.
Okay, but has UNIFIL lodged a formal complaint against Israel?
We will formally protest this, yes. We have mechanisms to do that. This has been raised with them informally already, but there will be a formal protest through our normal channels, yes.
Now, only last week, Israel was carrying out a wave of airstrikes in southern Lebanon. They said they were targeting Hezbollah positions in that part of the country. I mean, how much of a presence does Hezbollah still have in southern Lebanon?
For us, what we're seeing on the ground is we're not seeing a lot of activity per se. What peacekeepers are finding are weapons caches, ammunition, infrastructure that's been left behind from the conflict. We're not seeing any evidence of new establishments or anything like this happening on the ground. The violations that we are seeing are in fact mainly coming from the Israeli side, as we're seeing drone strikes, airstrikes, and the presence of Israeli soldiers north of the Blue Line, which we reiterate is a violation of Resolution 1701.
Right, so it sounds like you're on the same page as the Lebanese President, Joseph Aoun, who, when he addressed the UN General Assembly on Tuesday, talked about what he called the persistent instabilities along the southern border. Sounds like he's saying, and you're saying, those persistent instabilities are the result of Israeli actions, not Hezbollah actions.
The presence of the Israeli forces in Lebanese territory is definitely contributing to the instability, some of the instability that we're seeing here. The Lebanese army is deploying to the south following the cessation of hostilities arrangement that was set back in November, but their full deployment has been delayed due to the presence of these Israeli forces in the 5 positions and 2 buffer zones that they continue to maintain, which doesn't allow the Lebanese army to take full control over the security situation in the south. So we continue to maintain that the presence of Israeli military and the activities of Israel in southern Lebanon continues to raise tensions. As I said, peacekeepers do continue to monitor the situation, to patrol and to find weapons caches that we notify the Lebanese armed forces of, and they will take care of those caches that we find. That also contributes to stability as well, to ensure that the area in South Lebanon, in our area of operations, is free of armed groups and unauthorized weapons.
Now, UNIFIL works in close coordination with the Lebanese army. Just wanted to ask you before I ask my next question, how is that work going? How is that coordination going? What's the dynamic of that relationship between UNIFIL and the Lebanese army?
We have a really strong relationship with the Lebanese army, and we always have. We've worked very closely with them on not just operational issues like patrols and these kinds of operational activities, but also in activities to support the local population, in training with the Lebanese Armed Forces peacekeepers and Lebanese soldiers trained together to build their capacity together. And also things like this week, last week we've provided the Lebanese Armed Forces with some equipment to support them in their work to secure stability in South Lebanon. But our relationship has always been very strong. We work very well together. Peacekeepers have a very strong relationship with the Lebanese Armed Forces. We're helping them redeploy to the south, to their positions, and this has been going very well. They're doing a great job despite all of the challenges that they've faced in recent years.
So this is what the president of Lebanon is talking about when he says that together you're imposing peace and stability in that part of Lebanon. And of course, the Lebanese government wants the army to have a state monopoly on arms in the entire country, in particular in that part of the country. Is there any evidence that Hezbollah is trying to re-establish itself in that part of Lebanon?
From what we've seen, as I said, we have not seen activities by armed groups happening in our area of operations. We can't be everywhere, we can't see everything, but nonetheless, with our presence on the ground, we see a lot, and we have not seen the active presence of armed groups in South Lebanon. As I said, we continue to monitor and patrol the territory. We do find weapons caches, ammunition, infrastructure, but these appear to be legacy violations, things left over from the conflict that are dealt with by the Lebanese army.
Okay, and clearly the peacekeepers face daily challenges. It's sometimes dangerous work. But they are doing this thankless task of bringing peace and stability to southern Lebanon. What's morale like amongst the ranks of UNIFIL peacekeepers?
Morale is actually pretty good. Peacekeepers are dedicated to what they're doing here. We have almost 50 countries who send troops to South Lebanon because they're committed to security and stability in this region. And many of the peacekeepers who come here have been here multiple times. They've been on different missions over the years, and they live in these communities, and they come to respect and care about the communities in which they live and work. Peacekeepers understand that they have an important role to play here now. It's a really difficult time. It's been really difficult in the past 2 years with the conflict, and especially the war in 2024. But we're seeing progress in the last year since the cessation of hostilities arrangement. While the situation remains tense, it remains volatile, we are definitely seeing improvements from where we were a year ago. And this is motivating peacekeepers to continue doing the job, to continue working towards security and stability, and supporting the Lebanese army in accomplishing their tasks under Resolution 1701.
Nevertheless, I mean, a lot of damage was inflicted on that part of the country. The World Bank says around $11 billion worth of damage was done in these recent Israel-Hezbollah hostilities. 4,000 people lost their lives. But I just want to ask you what daily life sort of looks like now in that part of Lebanon. Are things returning to normal? And just give us a sense of the humanitarian situation there as well.
For the civilians living near the Blue Line, or who used to live near the Blue Line, life is very different. Most of the villages close to the Blue Line have been completely destroyed. I mean, I've seen entire neighborhoods in rubble, and it's completely devastating for the people who lived there, who want to come back, who want to rebuild, but they're not able to due to the tense security situation that is at play right now in South Lebanon, due to the unclear situation and the inability of the Lebanese army to fully deploy. People cannot return to their homes, and this is obviously very frustrating and very heartbreaking for them. So people who come from the villages near the Blue Line have a very difficult time. Some of them, most of them, are still living in other places with family members and elsewhere, hoping to rebuild, but not being able to do so. In other parts of the area of operations, things are better. There's still some damage, but not to the extent that we see along the Blue Line. But I think people are hopeful, if maybe not necessarily completely optimistic, but hopeful that we don't see a return to the conflict that destroyed so much of South Lebanon in the past 2 years. And this is why peacekeepers are continuing to work through all of the tools that we have, our operational activities and patrolling, our liaison and coordination mechanisms, which means talking to the different parties, to help ensure that this does not happen again.
As we bring this conversation to a close, I'd like to look forwards. UNIFIL's mission has been extended until the end of 2026, and after that, what's been described as an orderly and safe drawdown and withdrawal will happen through to 2027. I mean, UNIFIL's been there in Lebanon for 40 years. I just want to ask you, does it seem feasible that they'll be able to leave and hand over control of that area of the country to the Lebanese army in less than 2 years from now?
Tom, I'll be realistic, it's going to be a big challenge, but it's definitely something that peacekeepers are committed to doing. We will do everything that we can in the next, it's actually 15 months until December 2026, to work together with our Lebanese army colleagues and to be ready to pass over the security tasks under Resolution 1701 that peacekeepers currently perform. There will, of course, be a lot of challenges in that, and as the Security Council said in the most recent resolution, the international community will also need to step up to support the Lebanese army and to support the Lebanese government in being able to do all of this. And as you may know, the United Nations itself faces a number of budgetary constraints at the moment. This will also be a challenge for us and will possibly impact our ability to do all of this. So this is also a major concern for us. But we, as I said, peacekeepers are dedicated. They will continue to work with the Lebanese army, and they're committed to the communities in which they live and work. So we will do everything that we can to get to the point where we can hand over all of our tasks to the Lebanese army and to leave this area in a state of stability and peace, and stability at the very least.
All right. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us. Thank you very much indeed. Kandice Ardiel, Deputy Spokesperson for UNIFIL. Thank you for your time. Now, in other news, are nuclear talks between Iran and the EU heading for a deadlock? Well, speaking at the UN General Assembly, the Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian told world leaders that his country has never sought and will never seek to build a nuclear weapon. But despite those comments, sanctions are looming. The E3, that's France, Italy and the United Kingdom, have given Tehran until this Saturday to reach a deal. Well, they're demanding that Iran restart talks with the US on the future of its nuclear program and grant the IAEA full access to its nuclear sites. Well, for more analysis, we can speak now to the Iranian Ambassador to Egypt, Mujtabi Fardosi Bor, who joins us from Cairo. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Al-Arabiya English.
تحياتي لك توم.
Thank you for having me, Tom, and good evening to you and to the viewers.
Ambassador, we are just 2 days away from the United Kingdom, France and Italy reimposing UN sanctions. Those countries accuse Iran of failing to adhere to the terms of the nuclear deal. Are we any closer to progress? Is any progress being made in averting a scenario in which sanctions are reimposed?
صحيح الكلام. من يوم
Yes, that's right.
القادم سوف يكون هنالك
Next Saturday will be a reactivation of the snapback. Unfortunately, that will be done by the EU Troika. But with that said, Iran has reached into an agreement with the IAEA in order to just find different approaches of cooperation following the attacks on the Iranian nuclear facilities by the United States and Israel. And as you are aware, access to those nuclear facilities is quite limited due to the environmental risks associated with those places. Nevertheless, Iran is doing just all necessary with the coordination of many countries, including Egypt, in order to have a close cooperation with the IAEA. And this new approach is just seeking to find some kind of operation, collaboration between the Iran and the IAEA. Yet, there has been also a meeting for the Board of Governors of the IAEA, and on the same day, they just pass a resolution against Iran, stating that Iran has not been complying with the nuclear watchdog. Sadly, that is not the case, because Iran has been quite willing to reach into a balanced solution where all the mutual interests are achieved, and is ready to pursue a responsible approach. But it is asking asking the European Troika also just to take a similar approach that is based on diplomacy and also based on the international law. Therefore, I would like to confirm that Iran is still committed to diplomacy, but Iran's future acts and behavior will depend on what might be happening in terms of the reimposition of sanctions. Iran stated before this deal that have been done with the efforts, with the great efforts of Egypt and Cairo. Iran has stated publicly then that Iran will be signing the deal of collaboration and it will be working hand in gloves with the IAEA, so that and hope that we can avert the reimposition of the snapback. As an expert in this area, I believe that the EU country stance is different from what has been the case back in 2018, and namely the Trump's first term in office and the withdrawal of the U.S. that happened 2015. And of course, the U.S. and the Israeli attacks have worsened the situation, and therefore we know that from the very outset, Iran has complied with the deal signed with the P5 and but Europe has failed to honor its commitments, and in terms of just complying with the international law. And therefore, Europe has lost its power, it has become toothless in the face of the United States, and it's only wanted just to benefit from the snapback, just to do a favor for the United States.
Okay, you've made lots of important points there. In terms of assessing the progress of diplomacy, it's being reported that the UN nuclear inspectors are on their way to Iran, or they've even arrived in Iran in the last few hours. Can we see that as being perhaps a sign of progress?
Yes, I think, yes, this progress has been there. It's not something new. And even at the time of signing the Cairo deal, the inspectors of the IAEA were there. And they were able just to visit Iran. This is not something new. Remember, Iran is still a member of the IAEA and of the NPT, and has committed to comply with all the undertakings that it has signed with the IAEA. But Iran, however, has got the right to request the IAEA that the latter should have a technical role and not a politically driven role, and that the IAEA should protect the right of the Iranian people to have to benefit from the peaceful use of the nuclear power. We know that this will be just a win-win, especially given the recent trend of many countries embarking on nuclear power. And now there are just different deals that Iran might hammer for setting those nuclear deals. Why other countries are benefiting from this energy, renewable energy, such as the just neighboring countries, and why Iran does not have the right just to come on board and benefit from this nuclear power, even though that we have been complying with the requirements of the IAEA.
Okay.
And there has been an agreement that each state could really just take advantage of the peaceful use of the nuclear power.
I mean, some people will be asking, why is the leadership in Iran refusing to compromise on the issue of nuclear enrichment? Why not compromise, renounce enrichment, and allow Iran's economy to flourish? What's your answer?
لأنه بدنا نؤكد على هذا الموضوع أنه
We would like to emphasize here that the uranium enrichment
لها خطورة
up to
الموضوع النووي العسكري.
70% could be quite serious, but
راهنة جدا في
Iran, and from its experience, was always willing to provide the credible evidence to the European countries that Iran's levels of enrichment is not up to those levels of enrichment, and that was just and that deal goes back to 2018. What happened between the European countries and Iran is that those European countries have refused to support Iran with the with nuclear fuel, and that's why Iran started on its own to enrich uranium, because it needed the enriched uranium in different areas, such as in agriculture and also in manufacturing and generation of power, and that was quite essential. Therefore, Iran has no issue with that and rolled out many initiatives so that the production of enriched uranium could be done by a consortium that would be comprised of regional countries. And also, Iran proposed that the uranium should be enriched up to a level as agreed between the P5 plus 1. So that the percentage should be only 3.67 and not any and not in excess of that. And as I said, that could be quite helpful for just for multi uses for in the medical sector or also for the production of energy in Tehran. That's why it is imperative to have just this set of uranium enrichment.
Okay.
And this is something permissible, I think, to have the uranium enriched for those purposes. With that said, Iran has got also a fatwa that has been passed by the supreme leader and also by some other religious clerics that it will be prohibited for Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. And allow me to say here that in spite of those events that have been happening and the fatwa that has been passed by the supreme leader not to obtain nuclear weapon, but Iran is still in need of this technology, and it has the right to enrich uranium. We, as I said, that have been through a better experience, and we have learned from the lessons of the past that many countries, including the European Troika, have failed to provide Iran with the enriched uranium. And that's why Iran embarked on its production and now has got the capabilities and the sufficiency, thanks to the nuclear scientists, to embark on this process. And I said that can be used in different areas for scientific research, and this should be treated on equal footing with other countries. Iran has proposed many initiatives such as the consortium and also the importing the enriched uranium or enrichment to a certain percentage. Iran is well experienced in this domain, and all what it has been doing has been in consistence with the requirements of the international community. And we know that the universities of Tehran have been also dedicating their research for the advancement of this field. And it is the right of the government of Iran to take advantage of those new technologies and breakthroughs.
Okay, and just lastly, because we're nearly out of time, I just want to ask you a very general question. I mean, isn't it a pity that Iran's 91 million people who are gifted, creative, intelligent, cultivated, the makers of great films, who have a great and rich heritage, cannot freely work and travel around the world? Many people hesitate to visit your country for fear of detention and use as a bargaining chip in negotiations by the government. I mean, do you see a day when all of this might change? And could that day happen in our lifetimes?
لا أعتقد هذا الكلام ليس صحيحا.
I don't think this is true. The Iranian people and other nations should have complete independence and to cooperate with other nations. Yet, I would like you to ask this question also to the other parts. I would like you to ask this question to the United States. Why they are just introducing those policies against Iran? We have seen the results of the U.S. policies, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats, what they have done to our country. Over the last 5 decades, and following the victorious Islamic Revolution, we had the concept of reconciliation. But now we know that we hammered the nuclear deal in 2015, which was very important for our deterrence. But in return, does this apply to the United States? And we have also another important event, which is the Iran-Contra that happened in the 80s. There were different approaches. Some of them were diplomatic that have succeeded in order to reduce tension. And the third concept is the containment. During the era of George W. Bush, and there were different policies that have been really just leaving something to be wished, such as what happened in Iraq and the regime change. And then we remember what happened then, and we have seen the common factors of the U.S. policy in terms of changing regimes in different parts of the world. and that applied to Iran. And this just is an important sign that they don't want Iran to be independent. They wanted just to be tagging along behind the United States, and maybe they wanted just to splinter Iran. But it is the right of the Iranian people to defend themselves. I'm just wondering why they have those short-sighted visions in the way they just approach other countries. And we know that the geopolitical situation around the world, we can see how the international community has become multipolar, and maybe in the future we have to say that Iran will never stop as people to cooperate with other countries around the world. There are restrictions that have been imposed upon us by the United States. The United States wanted Iran to be just a fragile, weak country, and to be tagging along behind the United States in the Middle East, and that it is that the United States will be having the upper hand. And that is not true. Iran wants to be independent and doesn't want to be at the disposal of the United States. And I believe this is the right of Iran to do so. And I think this question is very important. As I stated, you have to convey it to the White House and to the United States. Why do you want to take control of other regimes in other countries, and especially in the Islamic Republic? Why do you want Iran to be submissive and following the dictates and orders of the United States? Iran wishes to be an independent state, living with dignity, achieving development, having collaboration with its neighbors. Apart from that, we have Israel, and that has also been responsible for the recent events. We don't mind to have balanced and quite positive approach and relationships with many countries in the world, including the U.S.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there because we're out of time. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us, the Iranian Ambassador to Egypt, Mujtabi Fardosi Bor. Thank you very much indeed for your time, sir. That's all we have time for on Global News today. Thank you very much indeed for watching. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for a look back at some of the best interviews of the week. Until then, bye-bye.